This is sick. That's what the governor of California said when he was told that the Trump administration is planning on on imprisoning more than 1,000 children. These are climate change refugees coming up from Central America. Yes, they're fleeing violence, they're fleeing gangs, but what's provoking the violence and the gangs? The collapse of the economies of those countries, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras. What's provoking that? Their crops are failing. They're failing because of climate change. They're failing because of desertification. They've got major droughts going on, all around the world at roughly equatorial levels, between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn. We are seeing massive droughts. And then just north of that, in the temperate regions, like the central part of the United States, we're seeing massive floods. This is the predicted outcome of climate change. And, excuse me, now we have these thousands and thousands of children, climate change refugees, coming to the United States and saying, please save us from, as our countries are thrown into poverty, as the economy slides into disaster, who steps in? The gangs, the military, the crackdowns. So last year in the United States, the Trump administration detained 59,171 children. Children. One of the fastest growing industries in the United States right now is private prisons, and the fastest growing part of that is private prisons for children. And they keep calling them immigrants in the media. These are not immigrants, these are refugees. And we have specific laws about how we treat refugees, and one of the things that we don't do is put refugees in prison. And we don't take children away from their families, except that that's what Donald Trump has been doing from the get-go. This year so far, and it's only June, Trump has taken 40,000 children. And they're putting some of them in Fort Sill. Fort Sill was used to inter Japanese during the World War II. It was also used to hold German prisoners of war. That's the kind of facility this is. And Donald Trump and Steve Miller are sending these children to these places to be imprisoned. And then on top of that, you got John Kelly, the guy who was the architect of this whole program when he was Trump's chief of staff. John Kelly is now either an executive or a member of the board, I forget which, but one or the other, of one of these large private prison companies that's specifically building these facilities to house refugee children. And what is this doing to these children? What is it doing to these families? It's tearing them apart. And this is just the beginning, my friends. We are looking at, the tip of the iceberg, to use the metaphor. And by the way, if you didn't see our movie about this, Ice on Fire, last night on HBO, for HBO subscribers, it was last night. Tonight, it'll be on HBO, HBO Go, HBO Now, outside of the paywall. So if you're not an HBO subscriber, you can still watch our movie. Sean saw it last night. Thank you, Sean. And just loved it. It is, the photography is astonishing, but the message is also pretty powerful, and I think you're really going to get it. And we are, the climate refugees that we're seeing here now, the climate refugees that Europe has been seeing over the last decade, mostly from Northern Africa and the Middle East, the climate refugees that are causing chaos in India, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, those countries, they're having climate problems now, crop failures and things in China. I mean, there is no part of the world that's not impacted by this. Record-setting heats in Australia. It's gonna get worse. And the answer is not to put children in prisons. This is Trump's answer. And this is just absolutely sick and twisted. We've been talking for the last couple of hours about, we've talked about a whole variety of things, and of course Congressman Pocan was on for the first full hour taking your calls. But we've also been talking about how the Trump, the essential criminality of the Trump administration and the fascist tendency. It's not even a tendency. Donald Trump is is running the fascist playbook. Divide people from each other. Foster and whip up hatred. Not just political division, not, hey, my side has better ideas than yours, but, you know, my side hates your side. You know, build up hatred. Reduce people's trust of media. Eliminate their trust for institutions of governance. This is fascism. The only winners in fascism are the big corporations. You know, fascism, the definition of fascism is the merger of state and corporate interests combined with belligerent nationalism. That is exactly what we are seeing right now. There are over 130 events now so far planned for this weekend, June 15th, on Saturday, June 15th. There's going to be one here in Portland at 11 o'clock. Where is it, Sean? At Terry Shrunk Plaza downtown. And they're happening all over the country. So far, 134 have been organized. As of last Friday, it was only 75 of them. So people are, you know, taking to the streets, as it were. And so just check it out, the National Day of Action. It's co-sponsored by Move On and by the People and other groups, this National Day of Action. So, you know, something to check out. And finally, Terry Canfield, or Canfield, tweeted just a fascinating thread. And I'll retweet it here during the break if it hasn't already been done. I'm pretty sure we haven't retweeted it, and I'll do that. I'll take care of that. But Terry, she notes that in September 1973 in Chile, General Pinochet pulled off a military coup and installed himself as a dictator. He was able to do this because the two political parties of Chile had basically gotten so far apart, and this is something that we've been talking about throughout the last couple of hours, is, you know, the tearing apart of America, the Democratic Party trying to build a country that works, trying to do things for the people, for the general welfare of the people, as envisioned in the General Welfare Clause of the Constitution. It's repeated three or four different times in the Constitution. It's in the preamble. It's at the opening of Article 1, Section 8. It's at the end of it. The Democratic Party trying to do what's good for the working people and average people in the United States. The Republican Party trying to do what's good for the billionaires and the multimillionaires, giving them massive tax cuts, increasing our debt, trying to end Social Security, trying to you know, drill more holes in Medicare, trying to prevent children in Republican-controlled states from even getting access to health care, trying to prevent women from having access to abortion as you know, as a form of health care. I mean, this just all of this. So anyhow, Pinochet in 73 pulled this off because their own two parties were so polarized. By 78, the two parties, Terry Canfield notes, by 1978 in Chile, the two parties started talking to each other. You know, it was the fact that the country had been taken over by a dictator, literally, that brought the two parties together. Eventually, she writes, they rebuilt trust, and by 1985, the anti-Pinochet forces came together and signed a national accord for a transition to a full democracy. And democracy was, in fact, restored. But it was this brutal dictatorship. I mean, you know, Pinochet, I was at a right-wing rally a couple of months ago, and somebody was wearing a T-shirt that said, "Throw liberals out of helicopters." That's what Pinochet was doing. He was taking, you know, opposition figures and, you know, taking them up a couple thousand feet in helicopters and throwing them out to their death. It was a particularly brutal and terrifying way to kill people. And so Terry says, what happens if we find ourselves in an actual autocracy? What happens if Donald Trump loses in 2020 and him and Fox News and right-wing hate radio say, oh, but it's a phony baloney election. It was rigged. The Democrats hacked the election. They, you know, the Democratic states, they hacked the voting machines or whatever. You know, if he says this and he refuses to leave, what do we do? And Terry's suggestion is Democrats need to find common ground with Republicans on things where they actually agree and pull together. I'm trying to figure out what those things are. I think there may be some, and in fact, this might be. I had breakfast on Saturday, I think it was, it was Saturday morning in New York City with Julio Rivera, who comes on this program and debates me from time to time. It was the first time we've actually hung out, you know, face to face in person, and we had a very nice breakfast and conversation about what our differences are, and also about the things that we agree on, and there actually are some. And Terry makes the point, hey, I met a cancer researcher who developed chemo drugs. She told me if she got cancer, she'd immediately go on a macrobiotic, it's a vegan diet, as the best way to organically fight cancer. And I thought, why wait? Why not start eating more veggies, rice, and beans right now, right? And she says the same thing with getting out of an autocracy. Why wait until Donald Trump turns himself into a full-blown Augusto Pinochet-style dictator? Let's bring this country back together now. Let's reach out to our Republican allies and friends and family members. She points out Trump is a master at manipulating and controlling the national conversation. He was trained by coaches at NBC when he was doing The Apprentice on how to do reality television. He did this for a decade or thereabouts. And he knows how to run a reality show, and that's what he's doing. Every single day in the White House, he's trying to figure out, okay, how do we get the words Donald Trump on the front page of every newspaper in America and leading every news story? It doesn't matter if it's good, doesn't matter if it's bad. As P.T. Barnum said, I don't care what they say about me, just be sure that they spell my name right. And that's what Trump has been doing, with the help of Sarah Sanders and Kellyanne Conway and a number of his Republicans. He's also a very skilled con artist. And most of the people who are Trump followers have been conned. They don't realize, who he really is and what he's all about. And he's cynically employing, this is a Yale professor, Jason Stanley, says Trump is cynically employing fascist tactics, not just to seize power, but to enrich himself. And Terry notes there's a proportion of our population who are fearful by nature. They are by nature averse to complexity and uncomfortable with diversity. And, we can't do much to change who these people are, but we can reach out to them. After Trump came along, he knows exactly how to manipulate them. And by the way, that field was sown way back in the Reagan years. And then the right-wing billionaires have been adding to that. So Terry's suggestion is all we need is about 60% of Americans to figure out that Donald Trump is a con man, a hustler, and a grifter. And maybe we can save ourselves.